Everybody knows this is the greatest TV station in the world, and you people have seen good wrestlers, you have seen great wrestlers, but now you are looking at the greatest wrestler of all time.
Before the scandals, before the chaos, before the tragedy, there was gorgeous Gino. To fans of world-class championship wrestling in the 1980s, Gino Hernandez was the man you loved to hate. Arrogant, flashy, and always 2 steps ahead in the ring, Gino wasn't just a character, he was the show. But behind that cocky grin and those designer sunglasses was a troubled man, a star burning too bright and burning out far too soon. Born in Highland Park, Texas in 1957, Charles had a spark even as a kid. He loved the spotlight. He was confident, charming, and had a natural gift for performing. When his mother married Luis Hernandez, a wrestler himself, young Charles found his way into the ring early. Luis trained him, guided him, and eventually passed down more than just wrestling advice. He gave Charles a name that would stick with him forever, Hernandez. And so Gino Hernandez was born. As gorgeous Gino fans hated him, and he loved it. He was the kind of guy who could walk into an arena, say 5 words and have the whole crowd booing. He played the villain to perfection. Gino was a natural heel. He knew how to get under people's skin. Whether he was running his mouth or cheating in the ring, he made sure the audience was emotionally invested. One of his most famous moments came when he smashed a beer bottle over Chavo Guerrero's head and insulted the entire Guerrero family. That wasn't just a match, it was a moment, and Gino knew exactly how to create those. He later teamed up with British wrestler Chris Adams, and together they formed the dynamic duo. They were flashy, cocky, and looked like rock stars. Fans couldn't stand them, which meant they were doing their job really well. But like most tag teams, their friendship didn't last. The storyline turned into a bitter feud, with wild, bloody matches that had fans glued to their screens. Their final match together, just a week before Gino died, was one of the most intense. Hair versus hair, pride on the line, and it ended with Gino, still that same cocky villain, still refusing to back down. But behind the character, behind the loud suits and louder attitude, was a man slipping further into something much darker. The world of pro wrestling in the 1980s was rough. Long travel days, constant pressure, and the need to always be on took a toll. For someone like Gino, whose whole career was built on being the bad guy, it was hard to separate the act from real life. The parties, the lifestyle, the danger. It stopped being part of the show. It became real. Gino was struggling with a serious drug addiction, especially to cocaine. People around him knew. His manager, Gary Hart, later said he tried many times to help Gino get clean. Others, like Brutus Beefcake, said Gino was an intense partier and couldn't seem to slow down. It was more than just partying, though. It started affecting his mind. Jeannie Clark, who knew him well, shared a terrifying story. One night during a drug-fueled episode, Gino became so paranoid that he held her at gunpoint. Later, he was full of regret, but the damage was done. David Manning, an official with WCCW, also remembered Gino coming to him in a panic, saying people were out to get him. He believed someone was hiding in the backseat of his car, ready to stab him. Whether that paranoia came purely from drug use or from real threats in his life, we don't fully know. But Gino was clearly spiraling. As Gino Hernandez got deeper into drugs, he also started getting involved with some dangerous people. It wasn't just about partying anymore. The people around him weren't just other wrestlers or fans. Some of them were part of a whole different world, a darker one. One name that keeps coming up when people talk about Gino's final months is John Royal. He wasn't part of the wrestling business. He was rumored to be a local drug dealer in Texas. Not a small-time guy either, someone who was really connected. Then more details started coming out. In a later court case involving John Royal and some drug charges, the government said in court that Royal had been supplying Gino with cocaine. Even more shocking, they claimed he had plans for Gino to eventually take over part of his drug business. Let that sink in, not just using drugs, but maybe getting involved in selling them too. A witness in that case said Royal gave cocaine to a man named David LeBeouf, who then passed it on to Gino. But this batch apparently had something wrong with it. That same witness said it was dangerous stuff. Royal, when questioned, denied supplying Gino with drugs. But by then, people had already started putting the pieces together. It paints a different picture of Gino, not just as a wrestler with a bad habit, but as someone pulled deep into a criminal lifestyle. And when you're around that kind of crowd, anything can happen. If he really was talking to the wrong people, or maybe knew too much, then the idea of him being murdered doesn't sound like some wild theory. It starts to sound possible, even likely. That takes us to February 4th, 1986, the day Gino's body was found. He wasn't answering calls. Friends were starting to get worried. So they went to his condo in Highland Park, Texas, along with the police. What they found was heartbreaking. Gino had been dead for about 3 or 4 days. His body was already starting to decompose. The apartment was dark, silent, and heavy with the feeling that something was very wrong. At first, the police treated it like a possible murder. That's how strange the scene looked. And for those who knew Gino, it made sense. With the kind of people he had started spending time with, the idea of foul play didn't sound far-fetched. But later, when the autopsy results came back, the official cause of death was listed as a cocaine overdose. Not just a typical overdose either. The amount of cocaine in his body was shocking. It was 5 times higher than what's usually considered fatal. There was even cocaine found in his stomach, which made some people wonder if he had swallowed it all at once. Years later, David Manning spoke about it. He said the toxicology report made it clear. Gino had taken a massive amount of cocaine. This wasn't just a wild night that went wrong. Something about it felt different. Still, even with all the medical proof, people had doubts. For one thing, the police originally thought it might have been murder. That doesn't happen often unless something really looks suspicious. There were also little things that didn't add up. Some people said Gino always locked his door, but when they found him, it was unlocked. Others said he'd been acting paranoid in the days before, telling friends that someone was out to get him. There were even reports that he had started carrying a gun. And then there was the funeral, the one paid for by John Royal, the man many believed was a drug dealer, the same man who, according to court records, wanted Gino to help run his drug operation. When you put it all together, it's hard not to wonder. Maybe Gino did take too much cocaine, but did he do it by choice? Or was he forced into it? Was it a tragic accident or something planned? Even though the official cause of Gino Hernandez's death was ruled a cocaine overdose, many people close to him never accepted that explanation. Friends, family, and longtime wrestling fans have questioned the ruling for decades. To them, something about it just didn't add up. The details surrounding his death left too many questions. One of the most talked about pieces of evidence was the state of the door to his condo when his body was found. David Manning, a former wrestling referee and promoter who knew Gino well, pointed this out. Gino always locked the deadbolt, no matter what. Manning said it was a habit, something he did every time he came home. But when his body was discovered, the deadbolt was unlocked. To many people, that small detail wasn't just strange. It suggested something more serious. Maybe someone else had been there. Maybe it was someone Gino knew and trusted, or maybe someone got in another way. Either way, it didn't sit right with Manning and others who knew how careful Gino normally was. That's just one reason many people believe Gino didn't simply overdose. A leading theory is that he was murdered because of drug connections. Gino was known to be around some dangerous people in his final years. In a 2016 interview, former wrestling rival Michael Hayes said what a lot of people were thinking. "I have a real hard time believing that Gino Hernandez OD'd," he said. He was most definitely hanging with the wrong crowd. Either he ran his mouth too much, or knew too much, or both. Hayes wasn't alone in that belief. The idea that Gino got involved with the wrong people, and that they may have killed him to keep him quiet, is still widely believed. The wrestling documentary Dark Side of the Ring covered his case and leaned into this theory. It suggested that his death may have been a form of payback from the shady figures he was spending time with outside of wrestling. Another theory, though far less common, came from two people who knew Gino better than most. His mother, Patrice Aguirre, and his ex-wife, Janice Bancroft, believed there was a chance Gino faked his own death. While that might sound far-fetched at first, they had their reasons. Patrice said Gino had actually talked about disappearing before. He had even joked or talked seriously about faking his death in the past. That made them wonder if maybe he had finally done it. What gave their theory more weight were the mistakes they found in the autopsy report. There were errors about Gino's race and physical features, basic facts that should have been accurate. One detail stood out the most. The report said Gino was uncircumcised, but his ex-wife said that wasn't true. That wasn't just a small typo. It was a major red flag. If that part of the autopsy was wrong, what else might have been? Then there was how his body was handled after it was found. By the time the authorities got to him, Gino's body had already started to decompose. His manager, Walter Amon, was the one who arranged for the body to be taken away. Gino's family never saw it. The funeral was closed casket, and no one in his family had a chance to identify the body in person. That fact still haunts them. Without that visual confirmation, it left room for more doubt, more questions, and more theories. Taken all together, these details form a much bigger story than just a drug overdose. There are several loose ends that don't tie up neatly. The unlocked deadbolt stands out as a major sign that something was wrong. Michael Hayes' strong belief that Gino was murdered gives voice to what many in the wrestling world have long suspected. The idea that Gino may have faked his death isn't widely believed, but it comes from two people who had good reasons to be suspicious. They didn't just imagine it. They looked at the facts they had, like the strange errors in the autopsy, and asked questions no one else seemed to be asking. Then there's the most unsettling part of all. The family never saw the body. That created a permanent sense of uncertainty. Without seeing him one last time, without knowing for sure what happened, Gino's loved ones were left with more questions than answers. No matter what the official report said, the people who cared about Gino were never truly convinced. All of these pieces, taken together, form a strong case for doubt. On their own, any one of these points might be dismissed, but when you line them up, the door being unlocked, the rumors about drug connections, the strange behavior around the autopsy, the lack of closure for the family, they tell a different story. Not a complete one, but one filled with gaps that still haven't been explained. Even decades after his death, people are still talking about Gino Hernandez. The mystery around how he died only grew stronger over time. In 2019, the TV network Viceland aired a documentary called The Mysterious Death of Gorgeous Gino. It tried to answer some of the big questions and bring peace to Gino's family, especially his mother, Patrice. One of the most important parts of the documentary was a recorded phone call with John Royal. He had been in prison for 30 years for cocaine trafficking and was known to be close to Gino. In the call, Royal denied killing Gino. He brought it up on his own without being asked. That struck a chord. Another man who was also involved in the drug business and knew both Royal and Gino added that Gino had been getting paranoid and acting unpredictably. While they admitted their lifestyle was risky and Gino's behavior was a problem for their drug operation, they said they cared about him and wished they could have helped. Hearing this seemed to bring some comfort to Gino's mother. For years, she had believed that Royal was responsible for her son's death. After hearing his denial and the explanation from his associate, she said she could finally feel some peace. It was the first time in decades she felt she might be wrong about what happened to her son. But even with that personal closure, the full truth remains unclear. The documentary gave new insight, but it didn't answer everything. For example, aside from the circumcision error, the public still doesn't know the exact problems in the autopsy report. And the timeline of Gino's final days, what he did, who he saw, and how the overdose actually happened, is still uncertain. Was it really an accidental overdose? Or did someone give him something dangerous on purpose? Could it have been a bad batch of drugs? Or did someone use his drug use as a cover for something darker? These are the questions people still ask because the facts don't paint a clear picture. The biggest problem is that the original investigation left so many gaps. The authorities at the time ruled it an overdose and didn't seem to dig much deeper. That lack of detail and transparency left the door open for conspiracy theories, rumors, and endless speculation. Later media, like the Viceland documentary, tried to fill in the blanks. They gave the public more information, but not enough to fully close the case in everyone's mind. Gino's story shows the dark side of professional wrestling. He was famous and charismatic, but he was also caught up in a dangerous lifestyle. Wrestling is a business where the line between a person's real life and their stage character can blur. Behind the scenes, the pressure, fame, and access to drugs take a toll. Gino's death is one of the most tragic examples of what can happen when things spiral out of control. People want answers. When someone dies young and the facts don't line up, the human instinct is to search for meaning. But in Gino's case, the mix of official silence, suspicious details, and shady characters means there might never be one simple truth. That's what keeps the mystery alive. What's most likely is that his story is a mix of everything: drugs, fear, dangerous friends, and a life that had spun out of control. It's possible the overdose was real, but the way it happened might never be fully known. Today, Gino's case is a warning. Fame doesn't protect you. Living on the edge can catch up with anyone. And when the truth isn't made clear from the start, the questions never go away. Gino Hernandez is still remembered not just for how he lived, but for how his life ended, with too many secrets still left untold.